town of Moonbridge always looked different at night. By day, its cobbled streets bustled with shopkeepers selling warm bread, ribboned hats, and jars of honey the color of golden glass. But when the sun slipped behind the western hills, the whole town seemed to exhale. Shadows grew soft, and the air carried the smell of wood smoke and blooming jasmine. Elara stood on the little balcony outside his attic window, clutching a knitted shawl around his shoulders. The moon had risen early, pale and round, and its reflection swayed in the dark ribbon of the river that cut through the heart of the town. The old stone bridge arched across it, wide enough for 2 carriages to pass, though at night only the occasional lantern-lit cart rolled by. It was said that every 100 years, on a night when the moon was fullest and the air was perfectly still, the first lantern would rise from the river and drift toward the stars. And tonight, the air was so still that even the leaves on the willow trees seemed frozen in place. Elior's grandmother, Ivy, had told him the stories since he was little. The lanterns, she would say, are the wishes of the town made visible. They wake when they've been waiting too long to come true. He'd never believed it, not really, until a faint glimmer caught his eye near the center of the bridge. At first, he thought it was just the moonlight bending strangely over the water. But then the glow thickened, gathering itself like breath on glass, until a single paper lantern, shaped like a teardrop, rose slowly from the water's surface. Elior's breath caught. The lantern drifted upward with impossible grace, water droplets sliding from its sides like beads of silver. It carried no candle, yet glowed with a light so soft it made his heart ache. And then, a voice as small and clear as a bell whispered right beside him. See it too, turned and found a tiny fox, its fur shimmering like frost in moonlight, sitting on the railing. Its eyes glowed gold, and when it blinked, sparks fell from its lashes. Elior stared, unsure whether to speak. The fox's fur glimmered faintly, as though a firefly's light pulsed beneath every strand. She sat very still, her tail curled neatly around her paws, and the river's lantern glow danced in her golden eyes. "You can talk," he managed at last. The fox tilted her head. "Of course, but only when someone sees the first lantern." Her voice was low, a whisper you might mistake for wind through leaves. "My name is Luma." Opened his mouth to ask a dozen questions, but the lantern was already drifting higher, its glow reflecting in Luma's fur. "Where is it going?" he asked. "Up the river," she said, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. "The river of stars begins here, but it doesn't end where you think. Tonight is the centennial crossing. The lanterns will rise, and they'll carry the wishes with them. But someone must follow the first one, or the rest will never awaken." Elior's pulse quickened, though he didn't quite understand why. "Why me?" Luma blinked slowly, as if weighing her answer. "Because you're awake when others are asleep, and because you listen to the quiet." Lantern tilted in the air, drifting toward the dark mouth of the forest that lined the far bank. Luma leapt lightly onto the bridge's stone edge and looked back. "Well, will you follow?" Elior hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping off his balcony and racing down the narrow stairs. The night air smelled of river mist and pine as Elior reached the bridge. Luma trotted ahead, paws silent on the cobblestones. The lantern floated several paces in front of them, moving at a pace just slow enough to follow. Halfway across, Eleor glanced down into the water. The moon's reflection wavered beside the shimmering ribbon of the lantern's glow, and for an instant, he thought he saw faint shapes swimming far below, long, graceful figures like silver fish, but with wings that folded and unfurled as they moved. "Look too long," Luma murmured without turning her head. "The river likes to keep its secrets." They reached the far side, where the road bent sharply into the shadow of the trees. No lanterns lit the path here, only the pale spill of moonlight cut through the leaves. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, then again. Eleor's feet sank softly into moss as they stepped beneath the forest canopy. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth. Luma moved ahead without hesitation, weaving between the roots, her glow a gentle beacon. "Where does the river go?" Eleor asked. "Where dreams go when they're too heavy to carry," she said. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The leaves overhead hung so perfectly still it was as though the air had been caught in a moment between breaths. No crickets sang, no branches creaked. Only the lantern floated onward, its soft light painting silver on the trunks it passed. Eleor reached out to touch a fern. The fronds were cool, almost cold, as if they'd been standing in shadow for centuries. "Why is it so still here?" "This part of the forest is older than the town," Luma explained. "It listens more than it speaks. When the lanterns rise, it waits." A rustle made Eleor look ahead. From behind a tree stepped a woman in a long cloak woven with starlight. Her hair, silver as the moon, drifted around her shoulders, though no breeze stirred. In her hands, she held a basket of river stones that glimmered faintly blue. "You've come for the crossing," she said, her voice both near and far. "The first lantern waits at the river bend." Luma bowed her head slightly, and Eleor found himself doing the same without quite knowing why. He followed the cloaked woman until the trees thinned and the river curved in a wide bend. The lantern hovered above the water, spinning slowly as though waiting for them. The woman knelt by the bank and placed one of her glowing stones into the water. "A wish untended drifts away," she murmured. "You must walk with it until it knows it has been heard." Stepped closer, the cool mist dampening his hair. "But I don't even know what my wish is." The woman smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. "Then you will find it along the way." Without another word, she faded into the shadow of the trees, leaving only the sound of the river's slow song and Luma's quiet breathing beside him. "Come," Luma said softly. "The real journey begins now." Stepped onto a narrow path that hugged the riverbank. The lantern floated just above the water, never drifting too far ahead. Its glow cast a path of light across the ripples, making them look like strands of liquid silver. The river sang, a low, humming melody that seemed to come from deep beneath the surface. It wasn't quite words, but Eleor thought he could almost make out syllables, like someone speaking in a dream. Luma walked beside him now, her steps matching his. Don't try too hard to understand the song. Let it reach you the way moonlight reaches water. They passed under branches heavy with pale blossoms. The petals glowed faintly, as though storing moonlight from seasons past. Some drifted down into the river, where the current caught them and spun them away. Are the blossoms part of the crossing too? Eleor asked. Luma's tail flicked. Everything near the river feels the crossing, whether it wants to or not. They walked until the moon slipped lower, brushing the tops of the trees. Ahead, the path widened into a small clearing. At its center was a stone arch covered in moss, the entrance to a bridge older and narrower than the one in town. The bridge was made of stone so worn that Eleor could see grooves where countless feet had passed. The moss along its sides glistened with dew, each droplet catching the lantern's glow. As they stepped onto it, Eleor felt a subtle vibration beneath his feet, like a faint heartbeat. "The bridge is alive," he whispered before he could stop himself. "Yes," Luma said simply. "It remembers every crossing. It knows the weight of promises and the lightness of lies." Across, they paused. The river below seemed wider here, the water dark and deep. Shapes moved beneath, not fish, not shadows, but something between, gliding slowly as if keeping pace with the lantern. A cool wind rose from the water, brushing Eleor's face. In it, he heard a faint voice. "Carry it well." When they reached the far end, the lantern dipped slightly, as if in greeting to something unseen, and then resumed its steady pace upriver. Beyond the bridge stretched a meadow bathed in silver light. The grass was tall and fine, swaying though no wind touched it. As Eleor stepped forward, the sound of the swaying changed. It wasn't the hiss of blades rubbing together, but the quiet murmur of many voices speaking at once. He froze. "Are they talking?" "They are listening," Luma corrected. And answering what they hear, Eleor knelt, pressing his ear close to the grass. The voices became clearer, a chorus of soft phrases. "Once I was a seed, I saw the lantern pass. The river spoke to me." He stood slowly, a shiver tracing down his back. "They've been here before. They've been here always," Luma said. The lantern floated to the meadow's far side, where a cluster of low stones marked another path. As they approached, Eleor noticed one stone was shaped like an open hand, palm upward. The lantern hovered just above the stone's palm. Eleor stepped closer and saw that the stone wasn't carved. It had grown this way, its edges smooth as if polished by centuries of rain. "What do I do?" he asked. "Place your hand in its," Luma said. Eleor hesitated, then pressed his palm into the cool stone. At once, a warmth spread through his fingers, up his arm, and into his chest. His thoughts slowed, and for a heartbeat, he felt himself standing not in the meadow, but in a place filled with water and light. When he pulled back, the lantern flared brighter, then resumed its journey. What was that? The stone wand.
Section 1. The village where time slept. In the cradle of a forgotten valley, where the sky stayed soft and the clouds moved like drifting thoughts, there lived a village with no name. No roads led to it. No maps remembered it. The villagers called it home, and that was enough. The village was small, just a circle of wooden cottages with mossy roofs and glowing windows. A stream curled through the center, singing a soft lullaby that the villagers had long since stopped hearing, like the ticking of an old clock you forget is there. Life moved slowly here. People woke with the sun, drank tea from earthen mugs, and watched the seasons pass with the kind of quiet patience that only comes from never expecting anything to change. And they lit their lanterns every night. Always the lanterns, soft glowing orbs hung on hooks outside every home. Children were told it was tradition. But elders lit them with trembling hands and did not explain why. At the very edge of this village, where the houses stopped and the hills folded into dense green, there began a forest. A vast, towering ocean of trees. The villagers called it Old Root. No one crossed its border. Not to gather wood. Not even to chase a lost goat. They said it was a place where time got lost. They said the forest was once a part of the world, but something had happened long ago, a story forgotten, a promise broken, and the forest had fallen asleep. And like any dreamer, it didn't like to be disturbed. When children asked what was inside, parents answered in low voices. The past. Echoes. Things that remember being forgotten. So the villagers stayed. They grew quiet. And slowly, the village began to forget itself. Section 2, The Girl Who Asked Questions. But one girl did not forget. Her name was Isla. She was 16 winters old, with coal black hair always braided down her back, and eyes that held questions the village had no patience for. Isla had been born under the winter moon, a sign of wild things, the old midwife had whispered, and she never quite settled into silence like the others. Isla asked why the lanterns were lit. She asked why the forest was forbidden. She asked why the village clocks sometimes stopped all at once, as if the valley itself were pausing to breathe. No one had answers. Or maybe they did, once. But the village, like the forest, was forgetting. Isla's younger brother, Eli, was the only one who listened. He was 9, soft-voiced and always a little behind in everything, his laces, his thoughts, his smile. But he adored Isla. I think the forest remembers us, he once told her, clutching her hand as they sat on a grassy hill near the tree-line. Why do you say that? Isla asked. Because sometimes, it waves. He pointed to the tallest trees where the wind made the leaves dance. But only at me. Isla smiled, ruffled his hair. Maybe it likes you. But even then, she watched the trees too long, and the trees watched back. Section 3, The Disappearance. It happened on the 3rd day of the red leaves. Eli was gone. No trail. No sound. His bed still warm. The morning milk untouched. His shoes left neatly beside the door. Isla knew something was wrong before she even opened her eyes. She could feel the space beside her bed where his small breath should have been. Empty. She searched the cottage. The garden. The stream. Then the village. But when she asked the others, the baker, the old shepherd, even her own mother, they looked at her blankly. Who? Your brother? You don't have a brother, Isla. Her hands shook. Her voice cracked. He's 9. He likes honey bread. He draws trees with faces on them. The villagers only blinked. Some looked troubled, as if a memory hovered just beyond their reach. But none remembered. Only Isla did. That night, she didn't light her lantern. She sat in the dark and stared into the woods. And the woods stared back. Section 4, The Decision. For 3 days, Isla sat in silence. She did not speak. She did not eat. Her mother tried to comfort her, placing warm bowls of soup beside her bed and stroking her hair. But Isla felt the wrongness growing, like vines climbing through her ribs. She dreamt of fog. Of trees whispering in a language that made her teeth ache. Of a ticking sound, deep beneath the earth, counting backward. On the 4th morning, she woke and knew she could wait no longer. She packed a satchel with a blanket, a small loaf of bread, a flask of water, and Eli's slingshot. Her hands paused on the wooden handle, worn from use. She traced the little bird carved on its side, something Eli had drawn for luck. She slipped quietly past her mother, who lay asleep near the hearth, curled around an empty space where Eli's laughter used to be. And as the village bells marked the hour before dawn, Isla stepped across the border of the forest. The mist welcomed her like breath. Final section, The Awakening. When Isla stepped into the heart of the forest, it was no longer just a place of trees and shadows. It was a memory made real. Time unraveled around her, twisting into the shapes of forgotten songs, lost voices, and faces she half remembered from dreams. She walked until the forest gave way to a clearing. There, in the center, stood the clock tower, taller than it had any right to be, draped in vines that pulsed faintly with light. The door creaked open, not by her hand, but as if the forest itself invited her in. Inside, the air buzzed. And there, trapped in the heart of the tower, stood Eli. Frozen, eyes wide, surrounded by floating shards of light. His voice called not through sound, but memory. "You remembered me." Isla stepped forward, and with each step, her memory solidified. The warmth of his laugh. The scrape of knees after climbing trees. The promise she made to never leave him. With a whisper, she reached for him, and the shards of time shattered around them in a swirl of golden light. The tower trembled. Outside, the forest groaned, ancient trees waking from their slumber. Roots retracted. Flowers bloomed. And the silence cracked like an old spell breaking. Hand in hand, Isla and Eli stepped out of the tower into a forest reborn. Birds chirped. The sky broke open in dawn. And somewhere, faintly, bells chimed from the village, not out of fear, but celebration. The people remembered. The forest remembered. And time, at last, moved forward. That night, for the first time, Isla lit no lantern. And yet, the whole valley glowed with peace.
The clock struck midnight when Elara first saw the train. It waited silently at the edge of town, where no tracks had ever been. Its body shimmered like oil on water, windows glowing faintly from within. Not a soul boarded or disembarked. Yet the door was open, as if waiting for her. Drawn by a gravity she didn't understand, Elara stepped closer. Her footsteps made no sound on the dewy grass. When she reached the doorway, a breath of warm air greeted her, scented with chamomile and old parchment. Inside, the train looked ancient velvet seats, golden lamps, and murals of constellations painted on the ceiling. A voice came from behind. "Ticket, please." The conductor wore a deep navy coat and a silver chain from which hung a pocket watch that didn't tick. His eyes were kind, but distant. I don't have one," Elara said. "You do. You just don't remember." He reached into his coat and pulled out a midnight blue slip with her name written in silver ink. She took it. The door closed. The train began to move. Elara wandered the corridors. Each car held something different. In one, toys long lost by children sat in tidy rows, stuffed bears missing eyes, wooden trains with chipped paint, a single red balloon floating by itself. In another, shelves overflowed with journals and diaries, pages filled with handwriting that flickered like candlelight. She passed a car of clocks, all ticking at different tempos. One showed a time from her past, her 6th birthday. Another showed a moment that hadn't happened yet. The passengers were quiet. Some wore clothing from centuries past. Others shimmered like moonlight. Everyone smiled gently, but no one spoke. When she found an empty seat beside a window, she sat. Outside, stars danced like snowflakes. The sky changed color every few minutes, from deep purple to teal to amber. She dozed. And dreamed of a name she had forgotten. The next car was darker. A single desk sat in the center. Behind it, a figure hunched over a ledger, scribbling with a feathered pen. "Welcome," he said, without looking up. "You've forgotten something." Elara stepped closer. "My name?" "No, you still have that. For now." He looked up. His eyes were mirrors. "You've forgotten why you boarded." "I didn't mean to." "No one does." He handed her a paper. A memory spilled onto it, a cabin in the woods, laughter, a guitar, the scent of pine. "My father," she whispered. "He's here, too," said the name collector. "But you must find him before the train arrives at the last station." Elara clutched the memory and nodded. The train shuddered. Lights flickered. The next few cars were not like the others. One was filled with mirrors, but each reflection showed a different version of herself. In one, she wore a crown. In another, she was very old. One mirror was blank. "Shoes," said a whisper. She stepped away. In another car, she saw a version of her childhood room. On the bed sat her favorite stuffed rabbit, long lost. She picked it up. It was warm. Memories returned in waves, bedtime stories, a song about stars, her father's hand in hers. Tears came. Not from sorrow, but from remembering. She moved on. In the dining car, the conductor waited. "You're getting close," he said. "Are you ready?" She didn't answer. Just held the rabbit tighter. He smiled. "That's enough." Names floated in the air like fireflies, some dim, others bright. They whispered when she passed. She recognized some, a childhood friend, her grandmother, a lost pet. Others were unfamiliar, yet stirred something deep. A pedestal stood at the far end. On it, a silver bell. "Ring to remember," said a note. She hesitated. Then rang. The sound echoed, not loud, but endlessly. Suddenly, her father's voice filled the car, singing the lullaby from her dreams. Her knees gave out. The lights brightened. The door opened. She stood and followed the sound. The train stopped. Only briefly. Outside, mist curled between black trees. A path led into the forest. She stepped off. Every branch whispered her name. The trees bent slightly as she passed. Shadows flitted between trunks, but none threatened. She found a clearing with a fire. Around it sat shadowy figures, humming. One stood. Her father. He smiled, and the shadows melted into light. They embraced. No words. When the fire burned low, he placed something in her hand, his guitar pick. "I'm always playing," he said. "Just listen." Then he faded, and the train whistle blew. Back on board, she met a man made of smoke. He flickered like candlelight. "Many forget," he said. "Few return." She told him her story. He listened. "I was once real, too," he said. "But I stayed too long. The train is a gift, not a home." He handed her a lantern. Inside, a tiny sun. For when it gets dark. She thanked him. He smiled. And vanished. The train passed over water. No bridge. Just tracks in the sea. Ahead, a lighthouse stood on nothing. Inside, mirrors reflected only truth. She saw herself strong, scared, searching. In the highest room, a telescope pointed skyward. She looked through. And saw the last station. A field of stars. She descended. The train waited. And so she boarded, heart full. The train began to slow. There was no announcement. No conductor's voice. Only the subtle shift in rhythm, like a lullaby reaching its final note. Elara looked out the window. Instead of trees or skies, there was only stillness. Not darkness, but something softer, like dusk wrapped in velvet. And just beyond the glass, a station appeared. Not a grand station, but a quiet one. Familiar. The door slid open. The air smelled of lavender and rain. The conductor was waiting. His coat seemed dusted with stardust now, and his pocket watch no longer ticked. "You've arrived," he said gently. "Where is this?" Elara asked. He considered. "It's not a place. It's a moment. The one you needed most." She stepped out. Beneath her boots was soft grass. Above, stars. Real ones. And there, sitting on a bench beneath a flickering lamp, was her father. He looked exactly as she remembered, tired eyes, kind smile, guitar resting against his knee. "I was waiting," he said. She ran to him. Hugged him like she'd never let go. "I didn't know where you'd gone," she whispered. "I never left. Just waited until you were ready to find me." They sat for a while. No clocks. No questions. Just presence. Finally, the conductor appeared again. "Time to return." "Will I forget?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not this. Not now." Elara stood. Hugged her father one last time. And stepped back onto the train. She woke up in her bed. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains. Birds chirped. The clock said 7:03 a.m. Everything was ordinary. Except she remembered everything. The train. The names. The sleeping city. The lighthouse. Her father. On her nightstand lay a folded slip of paper. A train ticket. Midnight blue, with her name written in silver ink. No date. No destination. Just this. For when you forget again. We'll be waiting. She smiled. And outside, in the distance, a train whistle blew so faint it might have been the wind.